She was a reclusive millionaire, haunted by a trauma no one could see, until a poor mechanic arrived at 2 a.m. to fix a broken light and ended up lighting her soul. What began as a stormy night turned into a journey of healing, love, and second chances. He stayed when no one else ever did, and she gave his daughter a new heart, literally. You won't believe how this quiet act of kindness changed 3 lives forever. Tell us, where are you watching from? Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more unforgettable tales of hope, love, and resilience. The storm began as a whisper against the window panes, like a warning too polite to be heeded. But within an hour, the whisper became a roar. Rain lashed against the glass like desperate hands. Wind howled through the tall redwoods that line the edge of Elena Hartman's cliffside property, and lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating her sprawling smart home in eerie flashes. From the outside, the house looked impenetrable, a fortress of tinted glass, concrete, and clean geometry nestled in the San Francisco hills. But inside, Elena sat stiffly in her dimly lit living room, spine tight, jaw clenched, watching the lights above her flicker. It had been an ordinary evening, or as ordinary as anything ever was in Elena's world. She had poured herself a glass of wine, reviewed financials from a foundation she barely remembered founding, and scrolled past dozens of unanswered texts and emails. She'd ignored them all, like always. Isolation wasn't a punishment, it was her armor. But when the first light blinked and dimmed, her stomach dropped. She tried to pretend it was nothing, a surge, a glitch. Her house was practically a living organism, everything synced to her phone. Thermostat, lights, doors, even the blinds. She tapped her screen. Nothing happened. The interface was frozen. The hallway went dark. Then the foyer. Then, the kitchen. She stood, heart thudding in her chest. She told herself it was just a blackout. She had backups. There were redundancies built into the system. She whispered the commands aloud: living room lights on, override, manual control. But the house didn't respond. The last light, a small lamp in the corner of the room, blinked twice and died. Total darkness. Elena didn't scream. She didn't even breathe at first. She just stood there, surrounded by the cold echo of silence, her mind cracking open like an old wound. Her hand reached blindly for her phone, fingers trembling. The screen glowed faintly. She called the emergency line linked to her home's maintenance contract. When the dispatcher finally answered, her voice came out too sharp, cracking like the lightning outside. "I don't care what time it is. Send someone. Right now." "I'm sorry, ma'am," the dispatcher stammered. "With the storm, we have limited—" Elena hung up, her breath hitched. She turned, eyes wide, navigating by memory through the vast, empty mansion. Her heels clacked against marble floors until she kicked them off, half running, half crawling up the stairs. Her fingers slipped on the railing. A hallway stretched before her like a dark tunnel. She groped her way to the master bedroom, flung open the drawer beside her bed, and found the flashlight. She clicked it. Nothing. "No, no, no," she whispered. She shook it. The light blinked on, faint, flickering, then died. Her breath came too fast. She dropped to her knees and yanked the drawer open fully, scattering contents across the floor. Receipts, stray pens, an empty bottle of sleep medication. She pressed herself back against the bed, clutching her knees to her chest, fingernails digging into her arms. The darkness wrapped around her like a second skin. And in that black void, the memories returned. 14 years old, walking home from school, a van, no license plate, a voice she didn't recognize and a smell she never forgot, cologne and motor oil. She never saw his face. The back of the van had no windows. Then the basement, cold, damp, concrete walls, a leaking pipe, the sound of rats, no light, no food, no time. She had screamed until her throat gave out, cried until she stopped feeling anything at all. She thought she'd escaped it. She thought she'd buried that chapter beneath wealth and architecture and the illusion of control. But the dark had always been there, waiting. She pulled herself across the room on hands and knees, found her phone again. Her fingers trembled so violently, it took 3 tries to redial the number. This time she didn't yell. "Please," she whispered. "Just send someone. I'll pay whatever it takes. Just don't leave me here in the dark." She hung up before they could answer and dropped the phone. The glow of the screen vanished, leaving her surrounded by shadows. Thunder cracked again, rattling the windows. Lightning painted the room in a brief, electric flash. Her reflection in the glass, hair clinging to her face, eyes wide with terror. She crawled into the bed, pulled the covers over her head as if fabric could protect her from memory. Her breath slowed, not from calm, but exhaustion. Then she heard it, a sound not born from weather or walls, footsteps, soft, deliberate, on the gravel outside. Her body tensed. She sat up, frozen. The steps reached the front door. A knock. She didn't move, not at first. Her instincts screamed to stay hidden, but another knock came, firm but not forceful. She grabbed her phone, still dead. Her breath hitched again. Whoever was out there wasn't breaking in. They were waiting. A long pause. Then a third knock, this time followed by a voice. Elena Hartman? A male voice. Deep, tired, kind. Emergency electrician. I was sent by Westwood Energy Management. She crept to the top of the stairs barefoot. The house groaned under the weight of wind and rain. She hesitated, then slowly descended, step by step. The foyer loomed, a cavern of shadow. She approached the door, heart pounding. She reached for the lock, fingers slick with sweat. She opened it only a crack. On the porch stood a man, soaked to the bone, holding a heavy tool bag. His raincoat clung to him like second skin. Water dripped from the brim of his hood. "I'm Noah Reyes," he said, holding up a badge, squinting into the dark. "You called for emergency service?" She stared at him, silent. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. She wanted to speak, to scream, to sob, but all that came out was a shallow breath. Noah looked at her for a beat longer, then gently reached toward the doorknob. He didn't push in, just helped steady it. She let him. He stepped inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, something shifted. She didn't know what it was, maybe the way he moved or the quiet in his eyes, but it didn't feel threatening. He removed his shoes without being asked. The marble floor reflected his wet socks as they padded softly behind her. She didn't lead. She just walked. He followed her down the hall, up the stairs, into the bedroom where the storm had first killed the light. The flashlight still lay beside the pillow like a failed promise. She stood by the bed, arms crossed over her chest. Noah knelt beside the nightstand. He opened his bag with practiced calm, pulled out a tester, then a small screwdriver. Behind him, Elena stood like a statue, but as he unscrewed the lamp's casing, he felt something, a soft touch on his sleeve. He turned. Her fingers were trembling against the fabric of his coat. Her face was pale, lips slightly parted. I'm sorry," she said barely above a whisper. I can't be alone in the dark." He met her eyes and gave the smallest, warmest smile he could manage. "It's okay, I'm right here. You don't have to be afraid." And somehow, impossibly, she believed him. He reached into his pocket and handed her a small LED light, simple, old school, but reliable. He clicked it on, placed it beside her. "I'll fix it fast," he said gently, "but this will keep you company in the meantime." She clutched the light like it was sacred. He didn't ask what had happened to her. He didn't ask why a woman with more wealth than entire city blocks sat trembling in the dark. He just got to work. Quiet, steady, unshaken. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, knees drawn to her chest, watching him. The flashlight's glow lit the corner of her face in soft amber. The storm still raged outside, but in that room, a different kind of calm was taking shape. She didn't know who this man was, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel entirely alone. And somehow, that was enough. The rain had not let up. If anything, it had only deepened its fury. The sound of it now was a steady wall, pressing against the world, blurring its edges. Noah Reyes stood in Elena Hartman's bedroom, crouched beside the nightstand, tools in hand, his dark hair slicked beneath the hood of his now dripping jacket. His fingertips moved with quiet certainty, as if the storm outside were a distant hum and not the relentless force it truly was. He had seen worse, not in weather, but in life. Elena sat on the edge of her king-sized bed like it was the last raft in a sinking world. She held the little flashlight he'd given her close, as if its soft glow could hold back more than shadows. Her hands trembled slightly, but her breath had steadied since he arrived. Just barely. She wasn't looking at him, not directly. Her gaze hovered somewhere near the window, where lightning occasionally illuminated the rain-drenched trees beyond. But her attention never strayed too far. Every movement he made, every twist of a screwdriver, every click of a wire, registered in her posture. Noah glanced over his shoulder just once. "You've got a short in the transformer near the panel," he said softly, his voice pitched low. careful not to break the fragile stillness between them. Storm probably caused it. Not your fault. Elena nodded, eyes flickering toward him, then away. She looked like she wanted to say something, but the words caught somewhere in her throat. Noah didn't press. He returned to the wiring. Beneath his fingers, the pieces began to make sense. He could feel the tension in the room shift, not just from the electrical currents but from something older, heavier. After a moment, he spoke again, his tone conversational, but respectful. This house is something. Big. Feels more like a museum than a home. Elena let out a breath that might have been a laugh if it weren't so hollow. That's what they all say, she murmured. Beautiful. Impressive. Sterile. I was going to say cold, Noah said, tightening a wire cap. But sterile works too. She surprised him with a small smile. Weak, but real. It's by design. Noah nodded, understanding more than she knew. He wiped his hands on a rag, flicked on a voltage meter, and paused, waiting for the reading. Silence filled the space between the beeps of the machine. Elena broke it, her voice thin. How old is your daughter? Noah blinked, turning toward her slowly. 7, he said. Lucas, she turns 8 next month. She tilted her head slightly, as if the name alone made something in her chest pull tight. Lucas, that's a beautiful name. Thanks, he said, then corrected gently. She's a girl. Elena flushed, then nodded. I'm sorry, I assumed. No harm, Noah said easily. Most people do. She thinks it's cool, says it makes her sound like a superhero. Elena let out a breath. It wasn't quite a laugh, but it wasn't nothing. What's she like? Noah didn't hesitate. Brave, too brave sometimes. She acts like she doesn't mind the hospital visits, the pills, the constant maybe next month stuff, but I see it in her eyes. She's tired. A beat passed. Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. She's sick. Congenital heart defect, he said, like it was something he'd memorized long ago. Has to be fixed soon. The surgery's expensive. Insurance is a joke. I'm doing what I can. Elena's fingers tightened around the flashlight. And yet, here you are, fixing lamps at 2 a.m. He looked at her, then shrugged. Bills don't care what time it is. She nodded, her throat working. I understand that. Noah turned back to the lamp. It flickered slightly, then steadied. The bulb glowed, a soft, amber light filling the space like breath returning to a body. He adjusted the setting, made sure the voltage held, and then stepped back. There, he said, brushing his hands together. Good as new. Elena looked at the lamp for a long moment, then at him. You fixed it. I told you I would. She stared a beat longer, then asked softly, Why didn't you ask what happened? To the light. No, she said, swallowing hard. To me. Noah considered the question. He stepped to the side, returned his tools to the bag one by one. Then he looked at her, not with curiosity, but something closer to recognition. Because I've met too many people who only ask so they can feel better about not understanding, he said. I figured if you wanted to tell me, you would. Her breath caught again, but this time, not from panic. He picked up the flashlight and set it beside the glowing lamp. You probably won't need this anymore, but just in case. She looked at the 2 lights side by side, one fixed, one offered. Her hand moved slowly, touching both, like verifying they were real. Thank you, she said. Noah nodded. He should have left then. Most guys would have. But something about the way she sat, the way her shoulders stayed curled inward like she was still bracing for a hit that never came, he couldn't just walk out. He sat down in the armchair near the window, still dripping from the rain. He didn't say anything, didn't move much. He just stayed. For a few minutes, the storm outside filled the silence between them. Then quietly, Elena said, I was 14. Noah didn't respond. He didn't need to. I was walking home from school. Same street I always took. I don't know where he came from. Just arms, a van, the smell of sweat and cologne. Noah's hand stilled. They never found him, she said. They found me. 3 days later, in a basement. I hadn't spoken in 20 hours. I don't think I really knew I was still alive until I saw a flashlight in the doorway. Her voice cracked on that last word. She didn't cry. She didn't shiver. She just stared at the lamp, its soft light painting her face in amber. It changed everything, she whispered. Not just what happened, but who I became. I stopped sleeping in the dark. I stopped trusting silence. I stopped letting anyone near. Noah nodded, once. I've never been through something like that, he said quietly. But I've been stuck, in different ways. Elena looked at him, eyes searching. My wife died 3 years ago, he said. Cancer. Quick and cruel. I didn't get to say goodbye. Lucas was only 4. After that, I stopped believing in timing. Just started surviving. One job, then another. Always afraid if I missed a shift, it would cost her everything. He met Alina's gaze. So, no. I don't know what it's like to be in your dark, but I know what it feels like to carry one. She nodded slowly, like she'd just been given something precious, something she didn't know she needed. Noah glanced at the time. He stood slowly, collecting his things. I should get going. My sitter's gonna think I got electrocuted. Elena stood too, not close, but not distant either. Her voice, when it came, was small but sure. Can you stay a little longer? He looked at her, then at the lamp. The glow still held steady, but her eyes flickered like a candle in the wind. He didn't hesitate. He placed his bag by the chair and sat again. Neither of them spoke. Not for a long while. The storm faded into the background, like a beast finally running out of rage. Inside, there was only the hush of quiet presence. Elena curled her legs under her, still clutching the flashlight, even though she didn't need it. Noah sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees, eyes calm. They didn't talk. They didn't need to. Because sometimes the thing that heals the most is simply not being left alone. And sometimes, the smallest light is enough to hold back the longest night. The storm had lessened by dawn, but the sky remained a dull slate, heavy with the kind of silence that came after something wild had passed. The rain slowed to a mist, clinging to the windows and lazy trails. Inside the house, a quietness settled, not the cold silence of fear, but a tentative, listening stillness. Like the house was exhaling for the first time in years. Noah had fallen asleep in the armchair, his head tilted back slightly, arms crossed over his chest. His boots were still near the door, and his coat hung dripping from the edge of the chair. He hadn't planned to stay, but sleep had crept up on him like fog, gentle, insistent. Across the room, Elena Hartman lay beneath the covers, not in panic this time, but in something softer. Her breathing had slowed hours ago, deep and steady. The little flashlight rested by her side, still glowing faintly, though she no longer clutched it like a lifeline. It had been years since she'd slept in the dark. And yet, the night passed. When she awoke, it was to the soft scent of chamomile tea, steaming, fresh, placed carefully on her nightstand. She blinked, her fingers brushing over the warm ceramic mug as if unsure whether it was real. A note sat beside it. Just one line, written in neat, deliberate handwriting. You're safe. Elena sat up, her heart fluttering not from fear, but from something else. Something she didn't quite have a name for. Noah stirred in the chair as she moved, rubbing his face with one hand and blinking at the soft morning light. His back cracked as he sat up straighter, and he looked at her with mild embarrassment. Didn't mean to crash here, he said, his voice raspy with sleep. Elena shook her head. You didn't crash. You stayed. He smiled, and it wasn't the kind people wore when they wanted something. It was small, honest, the kind that didn't demand anything in return. She gestured to the tea. Did you find the kitchen or just get lucky? I followed the smell of overpriced herbs, he said, stretching, and found an entire wall of tea options that made me feel like I was robbing a spa. That made her laugh. A soft, unexpected sound that startled even herself. Do you want breakfast? She asked after a pause, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. Noah tilted his head. I'm usually a gas station bagel kind of guy. I haven't cooked in years, she admitted. I used to. But now, I mostly reheat or order in. Then we'll improvise. They found their way into the kitchen. The storm's wreckage was visible through the wide glass panels, fallen branches, leaves scattered like confetti. But inside, the world felt calm. Elena moved through the space like someone rediscovering their own home. She opened a cabinet, found pancake mix that had expired a year ago, and shrugged. Noah found eggs. Together, they made something vaguely edible. He was in the middle of cracking a third egg when he asked casually, So, you live here alone? Elena hesitated. Yes, for years. No staff? They come during the day. Cleaning crew, gardeners, no one stays overnight. I don't let people stay. Except electricians, he said, arching a brow. She smiled again, faint but real. Exceptions exist. He didn't press. Instead, he flipped a misshapen pancake and said, You don't have to answer this, but the man who took you, did they ever catch him? Her shoulders tensed, then softened. No, there were no leads. I remembered his voice, but not his face. I heard breathing, footsteps, water dripping, but nothing I could use. He let me go, or got scared. I never found out which. She paused. Afterward, everyone around me tried to fix me. Therapists, teachers, even the media, but no one just sat with me in the dark. Noah's hands stilled on the counter. That's why I never got close to anyone, she continued. They always came in like they were rescuing me or analyzing me. I became a project. Then I became a symbol. Then I stopped being human. Noah placed the spatula down and turned to her. You're not a symbol to me. You're a woman who fought like hell to survive something she shouldn't have had to. That doesn't make you broken. That makes you exhausted, she offered. He gave a gentle laugh. That too. They sat together at the marble kitchen island, eating lopsided pancakes in silence. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't heavy. It just was. Elena watched the way Noah chewed slowly, his eyes thoughtful but never prying. He told her more about Lucas, how she loved space documentaries, how she asked hard questions like why bad things happened to good people and whether people who were scared were still brave. She asked me once if I thought she was going to die, he said, his voice quieter now. I told her no, because I had to, but I didn't know. I still don't. Elena's throat tightened. She deserves more, he said, but life doesn't always give people like her, or like you, a fair chance. Without thinking, Elena reached across the counter and covered his hand with hers. It was a light touch, but it sent a warmth through both of them like sun through a crack in the clouds. You deserve more too, she said. He looked at her, then down at their hands, then back up. Sometimes more starts with less fear. She nodded, and more trust. They cleaned up together. Then Noah said he needed to get back. Lucas would be waking up soon, and he didn't want her to find him gone. Elena walked him to the door. This time, the house didn't feel cavernous. It felt occupied. Thank you, she said again. He adjusted the strap on his tool bag. You sure you're okay now? I am, she said. Not because the lights are on, but because you stayed. He nodded. If you ever need anything, I'm one call away. Doesn't have to be electrical. She smiled. What else do you fix? He grinned. Not people, but I make a mean lasagna, and I'm decent at hanging shelves. The door clicked shut behind him, and for the first time in years, Elena didn't dread the silence. Later that day, she found herself in her home office. It was a room she rarely used, filled with old awards, plaques, and unopened mail. She rummaged through the pile on her desk, then stopped when her hand touched a sealed envelope. She opened it slowly. Inside were the latest updates on the hospital's charitable program she had funded but never touched until now. Her eyes scanned the words, and her heart froze when she saw the name. Lucas Reyes. Her breath caught. The report listed details: congenital heart defect, projected surgery cost, risk of fatal complications without intervention. She closed her eyes and leaned back, fingers steepled under her chin. That night, she didn't call Noah. She didn't say a word. She simply contacted the hospital directly and authorized payment for the entire surgery, pre-op, post-op, recovery, and even transport. Under a pseudonym, Lumen Grace, she declined public acknowledgement, declined a thank you, because for once, she didn't want power. She wanted to give something that didn't come with strings or expectations, just hope. As she closed her laptop, the room dimmed slightly. The light above her flickered. But she didn't panic this time. Instead, she smiled softly and whispered into the quiet room. Maybe I'll let it flicker. Just once. See if he comes back. Then she walked out of the room and turned off the light behind her. Not because she had to, but because she could. It had been a week since the storm, and the mansion no longer felt haunted. Elena moved through its rooms with a new stillness in her chest, not the old kind, brittle and hollow, but something closer to calm. She slept with the lights off now, not every night, but sometimes. She kept the little flashlight Noah had given her by the bed anyway, not because she needed it, but because it reminded her that someone had once handed her light in the darkest moment, not as a cure, but as comfort. She thought about him more than she meant to, about his tired eyes and steady voice. The way he hadn't flinched when she told him the worst thing that had ever happened to her. He had simply listened, like she was still a person, not a scar. She hadn't called him again. She wanted to. Every day she thought about sending a message, about offering something small, a dinner, a favor, Even just a thank you that wasn't laced with fragility. But she told herself to wait, to be sure, to not need too much too soon. So when the doorbell rang late on a Thursday morning, she assumed it was a delivery. Maybe the herbal teas she'd reordered. She padded barefoot across the entryway and opened the door. Julian Hartman stood there, smirking. "Cousin?" he said, leaning one shoulder casually against the frame. "You look very insulated." Elena's stomach dropped. Julian looked exactly the same as the last time she'd seen him. Expensive blazer, unbuttoned collar, too much cologne, hair styled like he still thought he was 25. The only thing missing was the knife he'd stuck in her back 5 years ago. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice flat. "I was in the area," he said, stepping forward without being invited. "Thought I'd check in on my favorite recluse." She stepped to the side reluctantly, her body tense. "How did you get past the gate? You really think a man can't sweet-talk a delivery guy?" He laughed, walking into the foyer and glancing around like he was appraising her life. "You redecorated, or maybe just stopped living in the dark." She didn't answer. He walked slowly through the hall, then paused near the base of the stairs. "It's funny," he said. "You disappeared for years and now people are saying you're talking to, what was it, a handyman?" Her blood turned to ice. He turned to face her, lips twisted into a smirk. "Word travels, Elena, even from electricians who don't know when to shut up." "You talked to Noah?" she asked, incredulous. Julian shrugged. "No, but someone on the board at Westwood mentioned a guy who did an emergency call at your house. Late night, long visit. Look, I'm not here to judge. If anything, I'm impressed. You've always had a soft spot for broken things." Her jaw clenched. "That must be why you let me hang around for so long before you finally kicked me out," he added, smiling like he'd told a charming joke. Elena felt the air shift inside her lungs, hard and cold. Her pulse thundered. She took a slow breath, trying to keep herself from reacting, from punching him, from showing him that he still had any power. But then his eyes flicked past her shoulder and caught movement. Noah. He had just stepped out from the hallway, holding a wrench in one hand. He froze for half a second, eyes flicking between Julian and Elena. Julian raised his eyebrows. "So this is the guy," he said, nodding toward Noah. "A little younger than I expected. Nice arms." Noah looked confused, then concerned. "Everything okay?" Elena couldn't speak. "She's fine," Julian said before she could answer. "We're family, just catching up." Noah's eyes stayed on Elena, reading her tension instantly. "I can finish the sink next time," he said, his voice calm, measured. "No rush. I'll get out of your way." Elena opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Noah nodded, not unkindly. "It's okay," he said softly. "Maybe next time." Then he turned and walked down the hall. The front door opened, closed. The silence that followed was deafening. Julian chuckled. "Wow, he didn't even push back. You sure know how to pick 'em." She spun on him, trembling. "Get out." "Relax," he said. "I'm just saying you could do a lot better." "Like you?" she snapped. "A cousin who drained my accounts while I was recovering from a breakdown? A thief who called it a misunderstanding because he didn't like being held accountable?" His face darkened, but only for a moment. Then the smirk returned. "You never did learn how to take a joke," he said. "Get out," she repeated, voice shaking with rage. He stepped back, raising both hands mockingly. "Sure, I've got what I came for anyway." "And what was that?" she demanded. He gestured vaguely to the space around her. "Confirmation. That even after all this time you're still just a scared little girl in a fortress made of glass." Then he walked out, the echo of his footsteps sharp on the marble. When the door clicked shut behind him, Elena stood frozen. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply walked upstairs, slow and mechanical, her body carrying her like it had forgotten how to feel. In her bedroom, the shadows felt colder, the air thinner. The little flashlight on her nightstand looked duller than usual. She reached for it, turned it on, and stared at the pale beam it cast across the floor. The light was there, but Noah wasn't. She sat down on the bed, curling her knees to her chest. The feeling in her throat wasn't grief, it was shame. She had let him go. Because someone made her feel like she wasn't worth defending. Like she wasn't allowed to need. Like even the smallest crack in her armor meant the whole damn thing would collapse. Her hand closed around the flashlight. She held it against her chest and closed her eyes. She didn't sleep. She just sat in the silence that Julian had left behind, thinking about Noah, about his steady hands and quiet voice, the way he hadn't asked for anything, hadn't demanded answers or comfort. He had just stayed, and when she needed him to stay again, she said nothing. Downstairs, the tea Noah had made for her was still warm on the counter. The scent of chamomile drifted upward like a ghost. Later that night, as the sky turned bruised with sunset, Elena sat at her desk. She opened her laptop, found the folder from Seni Laura's Children's Hospital and stared at the page. Lucas Reyes, age 7, surgery scheduled, status funded. She read it again and again. Noah had never asked, not once, not for help, not for recognition. But she remembered the crack in his voice when he said, "She asked me once if I thought she was going to die." Elena's chest tightened. She had given money to the hospital, a name, Lumen Grace. No return address, no identity. But now, as she looked at that screen, she wondered if she had given enough. If she could fix more than wires. If she could fix what she'd broken earlier that day. She stood, her resolve quiet but firm, and walked to the window. The glass reflected her face, older, wiser, softer. Maybe tomorrow she'd call. Not for another light, but for a second chance. The next morning came with a fog so thick it made the world outside Elena's windows look unreal, like the mansion had been dropped into the middle of a dream. She stood by the tall pane of glass in her kitchen, untouched cup of coffee in her hand, watching the mist roll over the treetops, obscuring even the nearest edges of her garden. Somewhere beyond the fog was the city, the noise, the people, the scars. But here, inside this quiet stillness, she had only one thought. She had let him walk away. And she had stayed silent. Elena didn't believe in second chances. Life had never handed them out freely, not to her. But something in her chest refused to quiet now, not since the moment Julian's smirk had disappeared behind the door and Noah's quiet presence had vanished with it. She opened her laptop. The screen blinked to life, casting a pale glow on her face. She found the hospital administrator's contact and typed out an email with surgical precision. A follow-up. Anonymous still, but more than before. She wanted to ensure every post-operative treatment, every medication, every quiet, anxious moment in that hospital room was covered. She didn't include a name. She didn't want gratitude. What she wanted was something no money could buy. The assurance that the light hadn't gone out in that little girl's chest. That Noah would never again have to choose between groceries and hope. By the afternoon, she received confirmation. The full recovery plan was secured. Lucas would be admitted the following week. The doctors were hopeful. Elena sat back in her chair, her breath shallow. A strange ache settled behind her ribs. Not pain, not quite. It was relief, maybe, or something close to it. She closed her eyes and imagined the steady beep of a heart monitor, the way a child might squeeze a parent's hand after waking up from surgery. She pictured Noah sitting in that sterile room, eyes red, head bowed, finally letting himself believe that the worst had passed. And she smiled. 3 weeks later, in a small hospital tucked between two hills in Marin County, Noah sat slumped in a stiff plastic chair, head in his hands, shoulders trembling. The hallway outside the pediatric cardiac unit buzzed faintly with overhead lights and murmuring nurses, but inside his world, everything was quiet except the low hum of relief. The surgery had gone well. The doctor's words had been clinical, cautious, but the smile on her face said everything. Lucas had made it. Her heart was strong. The rhythm was stable. She was going to be okay. Noah had cried the moment he heard. He hadn't cried since the night his wife died. Back then, he'd wept into a pillow so Lucas wouldn't hear. But now, he cried openly, unashamed. He held his daughter's hand as she stirred in her hospital bed, the machines around her beeping in calm succession, and whispered, "You made it, baby. You made it." A nurse stepped in quietly, holding a white folder. "Mr. Rise," she said softly, "these are the post-op details and coverage forms." Noah wiped his face and stood, taking the folder with trembling hands. He opened it, expecting the weight of numbers he couldn't carry, but instead the costs were marked as covered, entirely. At the bottom, just a single note, covered in full by donor, Lumen Grace. His brows furrowed. "Who's Lumen Grace?" he asked, looking up. The nurse shrugged. "We don't know, just that they insisted on anonymity. No contact info, just showed up one day, wired everything, and disappeared." Noah stared at the name. Something inside him stilled. He didn't need to ask again. He sat back down beside Lucas and held her tiny fingers, brushing the strands of hair from her forehead. His chest ached with the kind of gratitude that couldn't be spoken out loud. He didn't know what to do with it, where to put it. So he simply whispered, "Thank you," into the quiet room, knowing that somewhere, someone might hear. Down the hallway, behind a large glass observation window, Elena stood perfectly still. She wore a long coat, sunglasses despite the low light, and carried no purse, no security, no phone. Just herself. She hadn't come inside the room. She didn't need to. The sight of Noah holding his daughter, the tears in his eyes, the way his shoulders had finally dropped, she didn't need anything else. She hadn't expected to cry, but she did. Silently, a single tear slipped down her cheek, trailing across her skin and disappearing beneath her collar. She didn't wipe it away. She didn't move. Her hand pressed gently to the glass, as if trying to touch the joy on the other side. She wasn't part of it. Not really. But she had helped it exist, and that mattered. It had been years since she had given anything without expecting control in return. Even longer since she'd loved without the fear of being left. Noah had stayed once when she was at her worst. This was her way of staying too. She remained there until the sun began to rise over the distant ridge, casting golden light through the hospital windows. Then, without a word, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the morning mist. A week passed. Noah returned home with Lucas, who was already back to asking questions about stars and animals, and whether her heart would beat differently now. He smiled and answered them all, grateful for every breath she took. Then, one morning, a letter arrived. No envelope, no return address, just a plain white page, folded neatly and left on his doorstep. He opened it slowly. "My daughter's heart beats because someone believed I was worth saving. If you ever need to hear the same, know that you are." It wasn't signed, but the handwriting was familiar, precise, calm, unadorned. Noah sat on the porch, holding the letter to his chest, eyes closed. He didn't cry this time. He just breathed. Deeply. Fully. For the first time in years. He didn't hesitate. An hour later, he pulled up to Elena's mansion. He wasn't sure if she'd be there. He wasn't even sure if he had the right to show up, but she had written him that note. She had opened that door first, even without opening it literally. She answered after one ring. Elena stood in the doorway, her hair pulled back, a soft sweater wrapped around her shoulders. She looked tired. Beautiful. Human. "Hi," she said, her voice steady. "Hi," he replied. She stepped onto the porch and nodded toward the back garden. "Come with me." They walked through the dew-covered grass in silence. The sky was clear, blue. The kind of blue that only comes after long storms. String lights still hung between the trees, unlit in the morning, but full of quiet promise. She stopped beneath a low arch of ivy, turned to him. "There's still a lot of darkness in me," she said. Noah looked at her, not with surprise or pity, but something steadier. "Then maybe we can light it together," he said. She didn't speak. She simply reached out. He took her hand, and neither of them let go. The rain returned 3 nights later. Not the raging storm that had first brought Noah into her life, but a softer, steadier kind. The kind of rain that seemed more like a whisper than a scream. Elena sat by the wide living room window, a mug of lukewarm tea in her hand, watching the silver streaks slide gently down the glass. The house no longer felt cavernous or cold. It wasn't filled with ghosts, only quiet, the kind of quiet that waits, not the kind that condemns. She hadn't heard from Noah since the hospital. She hadn't expected to. The note she'd left, unsigned, unclaimed, wasn't meant to draw him back. It was a gift, and like all true gifts, it came without expectation. But something inside her still stirred every time the doorbell didn't ring. She told herself it was okay. She'd done her part. She'd stayed in the only way she knew how. And then the phone rang. Not a dramatic ringtone or an urgent buzz, just the low hum of an incoming call on the house line she barely used anymore. She stared at it for a moment before picking up. "Elena Hartman," she said out of habit. There was a pause on the other end, and then a voice. Low. Familiar. "Hi," Noah said. "Sorry to bother you again. I think another light's acting up, the one in the kitchen." Her breath caught. She turned toward the kitchen. Every bulb was glowing steadily, perfectly fine. "I see," she replied, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "That could be a problem." "I could come by in an hour," he offered, his tone casual. but just beneath it, hopeful. "I'll leave the door unlocked," she said, and hung up. By the time he arrived, the rain had begun to tap gently on the leaves of the old fig tree outside the gate. Elena opened the door before he had a chance to knock. This time, she wore jeans and a cream-colored sweater, her hair pulled back loosely, her face calm and open. Not perfect, not polished, just present. "Come in," she said with a soft smile, "and you don't have to take your shoes off this time." Noah smiled back, stepping into the foyer. The house felt different now, less like a fortress, more like a space someone truly lived in. She led him into the kitchen, where the light above the island shone bright and steady. He looked up at it, then turned back to her. "It's working fine." "I know," she admitted, shifting slightly. "I guess I just wanted some company." He set his tool bag down on the counter and leaned back, arms folded. "This is probably the nicest fake repair call I've ever had." She laughed, quiet and real. It surprised even her. They moved into the living room. Elena brought out 2 cups of tea and placed them on the low glass table between them. "I tried to cook," she said, gesturing toward the dining room. "It's not fancy, just pasta. I followed a YouTube video. It promised to be idiot-proof." "You're already doing better than me," Noah replied. "Last time I followed a recipe online, the fire alarm went off and my smoke detector called the fire department." Elena grinned. "I wish that was a joke." "Oh, it's not." They ate together at the long dining table, the soft flicker of rain playing against the windows. The pasta was slightly overcooked, but Noah didn't say a word. Instead, he asked her about her home, her favorite books, whether she'd always lived alone. She answered in pieces, bits of a life she was still trying to put back together. She told him she hadn't slept with the lights off in almost 20 years. He told her about Lucas, how some nights she looked at him and asked, "Daddy, am I going to die?" And he never knew what to say that wouldn't scare her more. Elena set down her fork and looked at him, her eyes soft. "I'm sorry," she said. But this time, it wasn't pity. It was understanding, a shared ache. They moved back to the living room after dinner. Elena poured them each a glass of wine. Noah pulled out his phone and scrolled through a playlist. Soft piano notes began to play from a Bluetooth speaker tucked behind the bookshelf. Elena tilted her head, eyes drifting shut for a moment. "I used to play this," she murmured, "before everything went dark." Noah looked at her then, not the kind of look that asked for more, but the kind that simply said, "I hear you." She turned to face him fully. "You know," she said almost to herself, "everyone thinks I'm cold, untouchable, even the people I've let get close. But the truth is, I'm just tired of hurting people or being hurt." Noah's reply was soft. "Sometimes being alone feels safer than hoping someone might stay." She looked down, then smiled. Not a mask, an actual genuine smile. Shy, unguarded. "I don't want to be alone tonight," she said, "but not in the way people usually mean." Noah leaned back, his gaze steady. "I get it," he said. "I'm not here to fix you, Elena." "Good," she said, "because I'm not broken, just figuring out how to live again." And then, for the first time in what felt like forever, Elena laughed, truly laughed. It wasn't a sound dragged out of her or forced into shape. It came from someplace deep, something soft finally waking up. Noah didn't need to say anything. He just smiled, watching her, and in that moment, he saw the woman she truly was. Not cold, not unreachable. Just a soul trying to find her way back to the light. The next afternoon, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of Elena's living room, turning the floor gold. Noah had arrived early to fix a leaky faucet in her guest bathroom, but they never quite made it to the sink. They ended up sitting cross-legged on the carpet with cups of coffee between them, talking about nothing. Everything. It felt normal. Strangely so. As if this was what the world should have always been. Then the doorbell rang. Elena frowned slightly. She wasn't expecting anyone. She opened the front door to find a man in his late 30s leaning against the frame, a sharp blazer clinging to his frame like a second skin, his hair too perfectly styled for the weather. He wore cologne like armor. Travis, her ex. Her smile stiffened instantly. "Elena," he said, his tone smug. "You look comfortable." She didn't answer, but her body shifted instinctively to block his view inside. Too late. His eyes flicked past her shoulder and landed on Noah, walking through the hallway with a wrench in hand. "Ah," Travis said. "So this is the handyman I've been hearing about, a little younger than I expected." Elena's jaw clenched. He's here to help with the sink. Travis smirked, stepping in without invitation. Helping with the plumbing, huh? Is that what we're calling it these days? Elena's spine straightened. Don't, Travis, he chuckled, raising both hands. Relax. I'm just saying. You always did have a thing for broken things. The memory hit like a blow. Years ago, she'd trusted him with too much. He'd drained her emotionally and financially. When she tried to take back control, he'd painted her as unstable, weak. And now, here he was again, sauntering into her life like he still had a claim. Noah appeared in the doorway, brows raised slightly, catching the shift in the air. I can finish the sink next time, he said gently, already placing the wrench back in his bag. Don't worry about it. Elena didn't stop him. She couldn't. Her voice was gone, swallowed by the old shame crawling up her spine. Noah offered her a small smile. It's okay, he said. Maybe next time. And then he was gone. The door closed behind him with a soft click, but to her, it echoed like thunder. Travis made himself at home, already eyeing the liquor cabinet. Still drinking the expensive stuff, huh? Glad to see some things never change. But Elena wasn't listening. She was staring at the closed door, her breath shallow, her hands cold. She'd pushed him away. Again. Not because he did something wrong, but because someone else's voice still lived in her head, telling her she wasn't someone people defended, that she didn't deserve anyone to stay. She walked past Travis without a word and climbed the stairs. In her room, it was too quiet. The little flashlight Noah had given her still sat on the nightstand. She reached for it and turned it on. A soft beam filled the space beside her. For the first time, she wanted someone to stay, and still told them to go. She curled beneath the blanket, staring into the dim glow. And somewhere beneath all the silence she had wrapped around her heart, a whisper rose like a tide. What if I pushed away the only person who stayed? Without asking for anything in return? The envelope had sat untouched on Elena's desk for over an hour, an unassuming white rectangle with her name typed neatly on the front. Nothing flashy, nothing urgent, but something about it pulsed with quiet gravity, like a string pulling gently at her chest. She'd seen her name written countless times in letters, contracts, headlines. But this felt different. This one had weight. And when she finally opened it, her breath hitched at the first word. Lucas. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the pages. Medical reports, post-operative notes, discharge summaries. A photo slipped out. A small girl in a hospital gown, smiling weakly at the camera, a heart-shaped balloon tied to her wrist. Her hair was pulled back in two messy braids, and there was a tired but unmistakable glint of mischief in her eyes. Beneath the photo, a single sentence had been highlighted. Patient cleared for full recovery. No further complications anticipated. Elena pressed her fingers to the words, her throat tightening. She read the rest slowly, scanning every paragraph as if the truth might slip away if she didn't hold it long enough. Everything, every cost, every risk had been accounted for. Her anonymous donation, signed under the pseudonym Lumen Grace, had covered it all. Not a penny left unpaid. She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes, overwhelmed by a wave of something she hadn't felt in years. Fulfillment. A quiet, soul-deep sense of having done the right thing. She didn't need anyone to know. That wasn't the point. But the image of Lucas's face lingered, glowing behind her eyelids. And along with it, Noah's voice from weeks ago echoed softly. She asks me, Daddy, am I going to die? And I don't know what to say. Elena pressed a hand to her chest. Now, he could say something better, something truer. Later that evening, she stood barefoot in her garden, watching the sunset melt into the horizon. The string lights above her flickered gently in the breeze. The trees swayed, their branches catching the wind like slow dancers. She walked the path of river stones she'd once had installed but never used, and for the first time it didn't feel like decoration. It felt like a trail she had finally earned the right to follow. Then, from the gate, came a sound. She turned. Noah stood there, holding a small envelope in his hand, his face unreadable, but his presence steady, like always. She didn't move at first, just looked at him, as if afraid this version of him might dissolve like the last time. But he stepped forward. I wasn't sure I should come, he said, voice soft, but I got your letter. Elena blinked. I didn't sign it. You didn't have to, he said, holding it up. This is your handwriting. She looked down, almost embarrassed. I didn't mean for it to be pressure. or a debt. It wasn't, he said. It was a lifeline. She swallowed. How is she? Better every day, he said. Stronger. She asked me if her new heart made her a superhero. I told her yes. Elena smiled, tears prickling at the corner of her eyes. She is. He took another step forward. She wants to meet the woman who saved her life. I didn't save her, Elena whispered. I stayed, the way you stayed for me. Noah looked at her then, truly looked, his gaze filled with the quiet reverence of someone seeing beyond what was said. That's exactly what saving someone means. She looked away, blinking fast. I didn't think I could do this. Let someone in again. I didn't think I could ask, he admitted, but you made it easier. There was silence between them, but it didn't feel like an absence. It felt like an offering. Elena stepped closer, her voice barely more than breath. Come in, Noah nodded, if you want me to. I do, she said with no hesitation this time. They walked inside together. The house felt different than it had when he first came in the storm. Warmer, lived in, whole. She poured him a glass of wine. He handed her a folded paper crane Lucas had made. They talked. They didn't talk. They let the comfort of presence do most of the work. Later they stood at the same window where Elena had once stared into darkness, her past pressing against her spine. Now the light from the garden pooled softly onto the floor, wrapping around her like safety. I thought silence was my enemy, she said, watching the reflections of the lights in the glass. But it turns out I just needed the right person to sit in it with me. Noah looked at her, his expression gentle. You didn't push me away that night, Elena. You just needed to remember you were worth staying for. She turned to face him, eyes wide. And now? He didn't move closer. She did. They stood inches apart. Her hand brushed his. He didn't pull away. There's still a lot I don't know, she admitted. About love, about being whole, about not disappearing when someone walks away. You don't have to be whole to be loved, Noah said. You just have to be willing to stay, even when it's messy. And if I mess up again, he smiled, then we try again, and again. That's how the lights stay on. She laughed softly. I used to think the only thing that made me strong was never needing anyone. And now? Now I know strength is letting someone hold the flashlight when your hands are shaking too much to turn it on. The rain began to fall again outside, just a soft patter, no thunder, no drama. They stood at the window, her head resting lightly against his shoulder, his arm wrapped around her waist. No words were needed, because the silence between them had become a promise. A week later, Elena found herself in a small classroom inside a non-profit center downtown. Lucas sat on a rug with a group of other children, drawing stars and moons and hearts on a paper mural while volunteers moved gently among them. Elena sat off to the side, unsure if she belonged. Then Lucas looked up and waved. Hi, Miss Lumen. Elena blinked, startled. Noah laughed quietly beside her. She figured it out, he whispered. She's sharp like that. Lucas bounded over, her arms wrapping tightly around Elena's waist. Elena knelt down, stunned by the warmth, the weight of those small arms, the easy trust. You're really pretty, Lucas said matter-of-factly, and your house has good snacks. Elena laughed, a real bright sound. You're welcome anytime. As Lucas ran back to her group, Elena felt Noah's hand find hers again. You okay? He asked. I've never been better, she whispered. That night, Elena sat at her piano for the first time in over 20 years. She wiped the dust from the keys, her fingers hovering with hesitation, then resolve. She began to play. Slowly at first, then surely. The melody that rose wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And in the doorway, Noah stood with Lucas, listening. Lucas leaned against him, eyes wide with wonder. He smiled, his heart full. As the last note lingered in the air, Elena turned to them, tears in her eyes. I used to think light came from lamps, she said, but now I know it comes from people. Noah walked toward her, his hand on Lucas's shoulder. And the people who stay when it goes out. She stood. They didn't say anything else. They didn't need to. They were a family, not made by blood or convenience or accident, but by choice. And in the hush of that golden-lit room, as the rain touched the windows and the past drifted further and further away, Elena knew something for sure. The lights would never flicker again, and even if they did, she would never face the darkness alone. Spring returned gently, like a memory you hadn't realized you missed. The garden behind Elena's home burst into bloom. soft whites and fresh greens climbing trellises and spilling across stone paths that had once felt decorative, but now led to laughter and purpose. The trees were wrapped in string lights that flickered like stars in the early dusk, and the patio was set for something small but meaningful. Noah stood at the top of a stepladder, adjusting one of the bulbs overhead, brow furrowed in concentration. The sleeves of his shirt were rolled up, his hands steady, competent, just as they had been that stormy night so many months ago. But this was no emergency. This was preparation, a celebration. Below, Elena sat on a wooden bench, her fingers gliding over the keys of a portable piano, coaxing out a melody she hadn't played in over 2 decades. It was the same piece she had clung to as a teenager, the one she used to believe could save her from the silence. Tonight, it wasn't a shield, it was a gift. Her hair shimmered under the glow of the lights, loose and soft, and her face was unguarded, peaceful. And across the lawn, barefoot in the grass, spun a child in a sundress and denim jacket, cheeks rosy, eyes bright. "Mommy Monica," Lucas called, holding something in her palm. "Look, a heart-shaped leaf." Elena stopped playing and turned. The name still startled her sometimes, Mommy Monica, but in the best way, like the sudden bloom of sunlight after a long winter. It wasn't just a title, it was a bond forged in time, in trust, in everything unspoken and enduring. She smiled, arms open. "It's beautiful, just like you." Lucas ran to her, the leaf cupped delicately in her hand. Elena bent down and kissed her forehead, then pulled her into a hug. Lucas fit there perfectly, warm and full of energy and life. A life that, once upon a time, had been at risk. Now, it pulsed strong and steady beneath Elena's fingertips. Noah joined them a moment later, crouching beside the two. He wrapped one arm around Monica's waist, the other around Lucas's tiny shoulders. They held each other for a long time, no words, just the wind weaving between their stillness. "You gave my daughter a new heart," he whispered to Elena, his voice low, reverent. She turned to him, her eyes shimmering. "And you gave me one too." They sat on the grass together afterward, watching the string lights blink softly above them. Lucas wandered off to fill a basket with daisies, her laughter ringing through the garden like wind chimes. Elena leaned into Noah, resting her head on his shoulder. The years of solitude, of self-protection, and sharp walls felt distant now, like a dream she'd finally woken from. "I lost a daughter once," she said quietly. "Not in the way most people think. But when I was taken, a part of me never came back. That part, the part that could hold someone this small and not feel terrified, I thought it was gone forever." Noah didn't interrupt. He just held her closer. "But somehow life gave me another chance," she continued, "not to replace what was lost, but to become something new." "I think," he said, "that's what healing really is." She nodded. "And what love is too." The evening fell slowly, silver and soft. They moved to the long bench beneath the arbor, lit by the golden hum of the overhead bulbs. The dinner table was still half set, the remnants of pasta and laughter lingering in the air. Lucas rested her head on Elena's shoulder, her eyelids fluttering. "She's getting sleepy," Elena murmured. "I've got her," Noah said, standing and gently lifting Lucas into his arms. She snuggled into his chest with a small, sleepy sigh. "You okay for a moment?" Elena nodded. She stayed on the bench, hands folded in her lap, eyes on the night sky above. For the first time in her life, the dark didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a backdrop, a canvas. And the lights, those delicate little bulbs swinging gently overhead, felt like promises kept. After a few minutes, Noah returned, a blanket in his hands. He spread it over her lap and sat beside her again, quiet. "You know," she said softly, "when you first knocked on my door, I was ready to break. Not from the storm or the blackout, but from myself." "I know," he replied, "and yet you didn't try to fix me." "Wasn't my job." "No," she said, smiling faintly, "but you did something harder. You stayed." He reached for her hand and threaded his fingers through hers. "I'll keep staying," he said. They sat there as the moon rose, the light of it filtering through the garden like a secret only they could understand. At one point, Elena tilted her face to the sky, letting the cool night air touch her skin. A soft mist had begun to fall, the rain so gentle it felt more like memory than weather. But she didn't flinch. She let it touch her, soak her. She was still healing, still learning, still carrying things. But she wasn't doing it alone anymore, and that, she thought, was everything. By the end of the week, they began moving forward as a family, not by declaration, but by rhythm. Lucas now had her own room in the mansion, decorated with glow-in-the-dark stars and a bookshelf that grew fuller by the day. Noah found work closer to the city and only picked up extra shifts when Alina insisted he take time for himself. Alina, for the first time in her adult life, stopped checking her security system every hour. She stopped sleeping with one eye open. They made pancakes on Sundays. They burned toast on Mondays. They danced badly in the kitchen on rainy nights. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And one afternoon, months later, Lucas came home from school holding a crayon drawing of their family, stick figures with bright eyes and giant hands. She pointed at the tallest one in the middle and said, "That's Mommy Monica. She keeps the lights on." Elena blinked back tears. Later that night, after Lucas had fallen asleep and Noah was tucking a blanket around her shoulders on the patio, Elena asked him a question she hadn't dared ask before. "Do you think," she whispered, "this is real?" Noah kissed her temple. "It's more than real," he said. "It's ours." And as the camera of time pulled back, past the glowing lights, past the laughter echoing through the rooms, past the gentle rain sliding down glass and leaves, Elena's voice rose in a quiet, steady narration, soft and full of meaning. "He came to fix a light, but what he lit up was my whole world." Sometimes the smallest light can pierce through the deepest darkness. And sometimes the stranger who shows up at 2 a.m. in the rain isn't just a mechanic. He's a reminder that love, healing, and second chances are still possible. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories, where every tale is crafted to remind you of the power of compassion, resilience, and the quiet beauty of the human spirit. Click subscribe and join us on a journey of stories that heal. Until next time, keep your light on and never stop believing. At its heart, this story reminds us of one of the most powerful truths in life. Sometimes what saves us isn't grand gestures or perfect timing. It's the quiet presence of someone who chooses to stay. Elena spent years believing she had to face the dark alone, building walls to protect herself from further pain. Noah, carrying his own burdens, showed up not with solutions, but with stillness, warmth, and understanding. And in that moment, without judgment or demand, he became the light she didn't know she was waiting for. It teaches us that healing doesn't always come in loud declarations or dramatic changes. Often, it comes in the form of steady hands, whispered truths, and the courage to let someone hold a flashlight when ours runs out of power. It reminds us that strength isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to open your heart again, even after it's been broken. This story is also a testament to second chances, not just in love, but in trust, in family, in ourselves. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that no one is ever too far gone to be found in the dark and loved back into the light. Where are you watching from? We'd love to know which part of the world you're tuning in from. Don't forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more tales that move your heart, renew your hope, and remind you that kindness and connection still exist. Thank you for being here.